9 o'clock Eastern Time. It's Ohio State Buckeyes Live. That's what that means. We welcome in Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone and also Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts to talk up the Buckeyes following an impressive showing, I believe, against Cincinnati 42-0. And we invite everyone to join our channel right here where we produce the best in college football analysis across the board. Ohio State's just one of many focuses. And, of course, the Buckeyes in the top 5 to 6 in the nation, depending on your poll. And please subscribe to the channel. If you have yet to dive into the videos, please do that first. And then we believe that you'll want to lock it in right here. Again, we got Tony Gerdeman on the line from the Ozone and Steve Hellwagon from 247 Sports. Bucknuts, how you guys doing tonight?
Very, very good. Steve, Excellent. How are you?
Steve's hard at work promoting the show. We appreciate it,
so I can tweet it out.
I was impressed, Tony, by this Cincinnati effort, meaning not the effort by Cincinnati, excluding maybe the first 5 or 6 minutes of the game when they actually had a nice little give and take of fourth down offensive conversion and fourth down stop on a Justin Fields sneak out of the spread formation. But besides that, it quickly went Ohio State's way. I thought it was a complete team effort. I thought the defense obviously was outstanding anytime there's a shutout, but I think they've played defensively 2 really crisp games. Week 1, more so when it mattered on the scoreboard. They let a few go in the fourth quarter, but have played 2 extremely clean games that we just didn't see last year.
No, we didn't. And I think the most impressive thing is when the Cincinnati game, when a running back would have a yard or 2 of clearance, they would get taken down pretty quickly. The entire defense is running to the ball. There are no missed tackles right now. And there's more than just one line of defense with this team. Last year, the way the scheme was, you would have just one guy on the edge, and if they would lose contain, then it would be over. Tough Borland at one point in the game lost contain on a play, but there was somebody on the other side of him, and he was able to get back into the play. It's just a defense that is more technically sound, fundamentally sound. And we talk about that you need that with every single player, but you also need it with the scheme. And the scheme last year wasn't as fundamentally sound because there are so many issues with, just think of the Maryland game last year, just the way they were lined up. Maryland would pretty much call their shot like Babe Ruth at home plate and do what they wanted. And you knew they were going to run this way. And exactly. And it didn't matter. And they would run it. And gosh darn, why didn't we see that coming? And now this year, they don't have that. The way I've seen it, when I watch it, it's like they've got 13 guys out there instead of 11. They always have more guys than last year. Or last year, it looked like they had 8 guys out there at times. Now they've got 11 running to the ball. And I think that also helps because, you play more zone, so you can see the ball and you can run to it. When you're in man a lot like last year, you might just get caught up with your guy and you don't necessarily know if something is happening behind you. So they're just more aware of things right now than they were last year. They're more sound on defense, and really it'll be a surprise. It's a surprise when they give up like a 7 or 8 yard run. And last year that was almost like a stop.
Your assessment, Steve, on 42-0 against the Bearcats.
Yeah, I've done a couple radio shows, and one of the guys asked me, were there any negatives coming out of this game? And I'm like, 42-0 against a quality opponent, a team that had won 12 of its last 14 games. You really have to stretch to find negatives. And I'm sure if I rewatched the game from start to finish with a fine-tooth comb, I'm sure I would find them. I know that Cincinnati was in position to score. They missed a field goal. They threw an interception at the 6-yard line, and they had a fumble knocked away at about the 3-inch line there toward the end of the game. So they left roughly 17 points on the field that Ohio State was able to preserve its shutout. So it looks better in principle than maybe it really was. But again, they got after Desmond Ridder and made his life miserable. The Cincinnati quarterback, they had 5 sacks total, 4 of them against Ridder. He had an interception, obviously. Should have had another one on the ball that skidded to Chase Young and went through his hands. Chase Young's hands are probably the biggest detriment that came out of this game. And yet so far through 2 games, he's got 3 sacks. If he averages 1.5 sacks per game, he'd be on a nice trajectory for an All-American honor at the end of the year. The things I guess that the list of things that were positive from that game is extremely long. Obviously, they did not play maybe quite as many young guys as they had the week before when they let off the gas pedal. I think they looked at Florida Atlantic as a game that they could use as a tune-up to get extra guys onto the field, whereas Cincinnati was, okay, we're playing Indiana, a real game, a Big Ten game that counts for championship purposes next week. We need our studs to play 3.5 quarters, and that's essentially what they did. So the top 15 or 18 guys on both sides of the ball rotated in and out pretty much, and they didn't get into the depth too much beyond the essentials until late in the fourth quarter. So that's kind of how I saw it. I think you couldn't ask for the game to have gone much better for Ohio State and Justin Fields, certainly. Again, against what we think is a quality Cincinnati team. I guess that'll be borne out over time, whether they win 6 games, 9 games, or somewhere 10 games, whatever, somewhere in the middle. I guess we'll see. But I thought that all in all, it was a positive showing. And for your defense, much maligned to have a shutout again against a team with veteran guys like Ritter and Michael Warren, who never got out of the blocks, 10 carries for 15 yards. He didn't do any kind of damage against Ohio State running the football. All of that bodes well as they move into Big Ten play this week.
Yeah, Steve, you mentioned the 2 worst things, and that was Chase Young's right hand and his left hand dropping the football.
Yeah, those are probably the worst things that came out of that game. I would have to really sit down and think. I think Justin Fields' pocket presence, it looks like 1 or 2 plays a game, he's going to go out into la-la land and forget exactly where you are. You are in the middle of a college football game, sir. The play where he rolled out to the home side and stood there and looked downfield Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then finally the Indiana guy came and sacked him. That was the only sack of the game. He's got to obviously throw that ball away on like Tuesday or Wednesday and not until Thursday or Friday. But he had a play or 2 like that, obviously in the opener against Florida Atlantic. But you look at his line, 20 of 25 passing. We know he threw at least 2 passes away and had one dropped by KJ Hill that was catchable earlier in the game. I don't recall the other 2 incompletions, but 20 of 25 against air is pretty good, let alone with a living, breathing Cincinnati defense out there.
Yeah, he had the 2 throwaways and then actually another throwaway on a wheel route to Jeremy Ruckert down by the end zone. Ruckert got pushed out of bounds, so he just threw it over him. Then you had the drop to KJ Hill. He had 1 bad throw in that game, and that was kind of an out route in a flat somewhere in there where it was not a good throw, and really the only bad moment other than that sack where they had like Max Protect and Benjamin Victor and Austin Mack were the only guys in the route, and he kept waiting for them to do something else, on the scramble drill, and that didn't happen. And so, yeah, that's one he needs to throw away, but it's better to learn it against Cincinnati than and know it now and then use it this week against Indiana if you need it.
Yeah, it was so much easier for me to evaluate his performance just because the coverage was reasonable. There were athletes on the field that were within range. Just that first quarter against FAU the week before was just difficult for me to evaluate when guys were there was nobody in the picture. You guys were at the stadium, but watching on television, just guys were just
there was nobody in the picture there either.
Yeah. Where were these guys?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So Justin Fields on a 20 of 25, and J.K. Dobbins found a ton of running room, almost 10 yards per carry.
He had his first home run since his freshman year, the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin. That was something he's been looking for all of, since last year, where his long run was like 30-some yards. And so to see him break free in this one, he had a 20-some yarder, a 12-yarder, which, whatever, and then that 60-yarder just to get him back out there, showing him that it is possible, that if you just play and just swing away rather than swing for the fences, you can hit a long one. And really, that first game, he was frustrated. Brian Day said he was pretty, angry throughout the week. And so he approached this game the right way, continued to run hard, and then had some holes where he didn't have to worry about breaking a tackle. He just ran. And it was good to see the receivers out there blocking and everybody. The running game was just a more cohesive effort. And even though they only rushed for 33 or 35 more yards in this game, it looked a lot better than it did the week before, where they picked up, a bulk of those yards in the fourth quarter when they're just trying to run the clock out with Master Teague. And it's not really what they do. So it was a better performance this past week against a defense that is probably going to stop some people this year.
Absolutely. Now we've got Indiana front and center as we dive into Big Ten play. This game on the road, where the venue isn't exactly daunting, overwhelming, loud, none of that, but still has been tricky for the Buckeyes to come out with an easy win, even with the likes of 2015, Zeke Elliott and that crew going in there and having a difficult time. And that game going inside the 5-yard line with Indiana throwing the ball into the end zone to pull out a victory. And obviously the last time they were there was J.K. Dobbins' breakout game as a freshman, game number 1, an August game in which Ohio State had all sorts of issues covering on the outside early in the game, pulled away and won by, I think, 49-21, something in that range. But Indiana's been a difficult place to play, Steve.
Yeah. This will probably be the 10th, 12th, 13th time I've been there for a football game in my number of years over time. And, they now have a 4-lane divided highway pretty much from about 3 miles south of Indianapolis all the way to Bloomington. So that alleviates some of the traffic issues for people trying to get to the game. This is a noon game, which in its own right will suck because everybody's going to leave Indianapolis about 10:15 to try and get there by 11:30 and get in their seat by 12 o'clock for the game. So if you get out ahead of the traffic, you'll be in good shape. Typically, I've seen anywhere from 15 to 20,000 Ohio State fans in attendance at games at Indiana. The place seats about 55,000, and it's usually full, but 1/3 of them are usually Ohio State people. And if you go on the ticket sites, I know you can get into this game matching, believe it or not, 2-0 Ohio State and 2-0 Indiana. If you have $65, you can watch this game live at Memorial Stadium. And I will say it's an okay place to watch a game. I will say, if I had to rank the Big Ten stadiums, it'd probably come in around 9, 10, 11 in that range, because I don't think it's as good as Purdue when Purdue's got it going good, or knocking off Ohio State in the night game last year, or certainly not as good as Iowa and some of the other places. But it's maybe a little bit underrated as a place to watch a game because all the seats are pretty close to the action. And as you put it, Ohio State on paper has won 24 straight games against Indiana, including the 2010 game, which was vacated by NCAA sanctions, but it was definitely played, and Ohio State blew them out in Jim Tressel's triumphant final season that never was as the Ohio State coach. And that string dates to a tie. In 1990, it was 27-27 at Indiana. The only 2 times Ohio State has lost to Indiana since 1952 came in back-to-back seasons. 1987, which was, as Earl Bruce said, OSU's darkest day, 31-10 at Ohio Stadium. Woo, that was awful. And then the following year, John Cooper's first season was darkest day too. They went out to Indiana and lost 41-7. And I think Anthony Thompson was at the running back. He's still leaping over the pile for more touchdowns as we speak. So those were 2 that really stood out over time. I was an undergrad at Ohio State in that period in 80. Well, that was that 80. 87 and 88. And you really almost had to smuggle in your own 6-pack of beer to be able to sit through the football. It was that bad. So, and thankfully they didn't check you. You know, you don't go through a metal detector like you do now. Otherwise, you couldn't bring in your own 6-pack of beer. But at any rate, I digress. The last 3 trips, as you said, 52-49, the game where they finally realized they had to put, Zach Boren from fullback over to linebacker, and he saved their bacon at middle linebacker. They had no linebackers that season. I think it was Etienne Sabino got hurt, and Shazier was not quite Shazier yet, or whatever it was. In 2012, they win every game, 12-0. They beat Purdue in overtime at home, which was probably the closest call, but this one was right there, 52-49 at Indiana. Didn't play there again until 2015. Zeke Elliott had touchdown runs, believe it or not, 50 yards, 60 yards, and 70 yards for good measure. And they only win the game 34-27 because Cardale Jones could not convert in the red zone to save his life. And that was when the Tide switched back to JT Barrett to finish that season. We know how the fickle finger of fate did not go their way. Had Cardale played against Michigan State later that year, maybe things would have been a little bit different. But at any rate, that was a remarkable game. And then, of course, 2 years ago, season opener, Thursday night, Kirk Herbstreit's there. They do kind of a limited game day as they did this year on the Thursday night. And Ohio State was predicted to have a great team that season in 2017, and yet they left whatever mojo they had back on the Mick Marotti field on July 15th out there in a 90-degree heat and had nothing for the opener. They had no juice, no nothing. And we're trailing 14-13 at halftime, still trailing after a turnover on downs, I want to say with 5-6 minutes to go in the third period, and still in the final 20 minutes of the game blew them out and won the game 49-20, I think was the final score, something along those lines. So what that tells you, and I know the last 5 times they've played, Ohio State has only covered, or as they say, beat the spread or covered the spread one time in those 4 years, which I think was that game, the 49-20 game, where they was a backdoor cover, trailing the entire game and get it at the end. Otherwise, Ohio State has not, as the guys in Vegas would say, met the number in the other 4 times they've played Indiana in the last 5 years. So if you're not on guard to play Indiana after that whole diatribe that I just went through, then you don't deserve to be Big Ten champions, because Ohio State's dominated this conference with 10 championships in the last 18 seasons, won or shared their division in each of the, last 7 years under Urban Meyer. They always won the division or tied for it. And that starts on Saturday for real at Indiana. So young guys on the team, be ready. This isn't Indiana, which they wouldn't know anything about, how Ohio State used to beat them 50-6 every time they played them. This is a little different animal now.
Yeah, certainly at the point that Earl Bruce made that statement after they lost, as you mentioned, 31-10 in 1987, which was a string of very close losses. That was the one blowout loss as they were blown out inexplicably by the Hoosiers, because, as you mentioned, it was unfathomable to imagine Indiana playing in a game competitively with Ohio State, let alone beat them, because all the string of scores in the 70s and 80s were, and just a few years prior to that were a lot of 52-3s and 48-7s, and a lot of those against IU. I noticed that Saturday's spread is only 14 points. Now, I certainly jumped all over the Buckeyes, giving only 15.5 against Cincinnati last week, and felt good about that. And I'm kind of eyeing the same type deal, and I know it's on the road.
When I looked at it today on coverage.com, which is where I go to kind of get updated information, it had actually been bet up to 16.5 at this point. Okay. So I think whether that's public money or the Sharps or whoever, whoever's out there early has hammered that 14.5, 15, and now it's up over 16. So I think people are realizing that Indiana has a decent enough team. They might win 6 games, 7 games to get to a bowl. But their quarterback is a redshirt freshman. He threw 2 picks in the season opener against Ball State, neither of which were good throws or even close to his receivers. It was basically right to the Ball State defender. He's a young guy. Ohio State chews up and spits out young quarterbacks who have hardly played. So I think that's probably what's some. I mean, he's a good player, but I think we have to buyer beware this and say, Ohio State's got the potential to force him into 3 turnovers very easily on Saturday.
Uncle Lou has a great YouTube channel, college football channel. I believe I'm contractually obligated to read anything that includes money coming our way. So $5 from Uncle Lou, who I hope he caught my apology in the last hour, because he apparently did the same and I missed it. But I don't know if either one of you can speak to this, that there was a Georgia-Ohio State cancellation of a home and home. That happened a number of times when the Big Ten went to a 9-game schedule from an 8-game schedule. I don't know if this one comes to mind, but Uncle Lou having fun with the light touch of FAU, Cincy, and Miami of Ohio, and his spelling of sense is called into question. But besides that, it's a $5 question. So there it is.
I don't remember the exact reason for this. I do recall Georgia not putting up a fight, or it was like more of a let's both just not do this. And again, the reason they're stuck with Florida Atlantic and Miami and Cincinnati this year is because the TCU thing got split from a home and home to just a one-off last year at Jerry World. So it would have been TCU this year. And, so we see so many of these games that get scheduled, don't end up. I know as of a few years ago, Michigan and Arkansas were supposed to open the season this year. That obviously didn't happen. And so you sign these contracts, but it doesn't take much to break them, as long as you break them early enough and you're both willing. And they were definitely willing partners. Just as they were to play it, they were just as willing to not play it. And I think those 2 schools, Georgia and Ohio State, when you ask Buckeye fans, who they would like to play non-conference, Georgia always comes up as one of those teams that they would like to play. Not a neutral site game. The Big Ten, we prefer home and home games here. Keep it on campus. Let college football be what it's supposed to be, what makes it great. And we could get into a Nick Saban thing where he says he can't make schedules and he complains about this and that. But in the Big Ten, I want campus games. Sure, it's great going to Jerry World. It's always fun being there, but keep that for bowl games, championship games, regular season. I want them on campus. I'd rather spend my time at TCU seeing what they've got, rather than seeing what Jerry's got for the second time in 2 years. Keep stuff on campus. Let the fans enjoy it. Keep the bands playing. Just keep it as college football-y as possible for as long as possible, even though it has been taken over by money. The reason people are spending so much money, TV networks are spending so much money, is because people are watching college football because they appreciate the college aspect of it. And we don't need to turn it into the NFL.
My recollection on Ohio State and Georgia, and my timeline could be off, but this was something that went on the books around 2009, 2010 for later in this decade, or perhaps early 2020s. I don't know, if I took 5 minutes and did a search, I'm sure I would find the exact dates and locations and everything else. It was on there. It was etched in stone. But here's what happened over various years. There have been knee-jerk reactions in the Big Ten regarding scheduling. Jim Delaney says we don't want to play any more FCS opponents. So for a while there, they had a moratorium on that. Now, as we saw Indiana played Eastern Illinois last week, they've kind of relaxed that, I think, because there's a dearth of viable opponents for your guaranteed games. So, Ohio State played Youngstown State a couple times, but that was it. Regarding what happened, Gene Smith, I don't know if it was Gene Smith, but Jim Delaney at some point got this this crazy idea. Let's do a Big Ten Pac-12 series. And they wanted to do it like almost every year, which meant that every other year, these teams in the Midwest were going to have to fly out to the West Coast and play somebody, whereas in the past, they've only done that like once a decade. And so I think what they did is they went back to the athletic directors and they said, clear the decks, get rid of your, big non-conference opponents, because we're going to have you playing Washington and USC and UCLA and all these teams out on the West Coast on an annual basis. They'll come to your place, you'll go out there. So I think Georgia got purged, and they, honest to God, and I'm serious, that was a serious thought that was going around for like 2 years. And then I think common sense prevailed that this is Looney Tunes, that the Big Ten schools would fly out there every other year and, and play somebody, play Washington State or somebody. They're just eventually over time that became an air biscuit and it just died away. But they had gone in and uprooted their schedules in the meantime. And then when the wind changed, everyone was left to go find new dance partners. And let me tell you, Ohio State has found a few. They're going to play Texas, Notre Dame, Oregon home and home next year, Boston College. I think Washington's in there. So they've got some quality non-conference opponents coming up in the years ahead, and are going to take this brand on a national scale all over the country. So, it doesn't used to not getting bigger than playing Notre Dame. Now, number 15 Notre Dame, whip-de ding dong. So that's my long dissertation on what I think happened with Ohio State and Georgia.
I really don't understand the fascination with the Pac-12 and why Jim Delaney thought that would be.
Cooler heads have prevailed.
Because
smarter people prevailed.
I just don't get it.
Jim Delaney has always been the smartest man in the room when he's in that room.
Especially when he's in the same room with Larry Scott.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, sure. Yes.
Poor Larry Scott.
Oh, my goodness. He's got a rough go there.
Oregon loses to Auburn. It's because of Larry Scott.
We talk Ohio State football every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern time. I want to remind you of a number of things. First of all, we condense all these conversations, segment them down to 5 to 10 minutes, and present them at our Ohio State channel. So subscribe over there if you don't want to sort through all the Auburns and Alabamas and Michigans and Penn States. Just want Ohio State football coverage. Join it right there. Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts. Please join them as they cover Ohio State football every day. I cover the game we love, college football, each and every day with the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry, plus analysis from myself, of which I've given myself, based on a conversation in our last hour, the assignment of defining what is relevant and who is relevant in college football and what that means. But I'm not going to answer that question based on just off the top of my head. I like to have a little thought put into that.
Is it like the Supreme Court? You know it when you see it?
Yeah, it's like baseball Hall of Fame voting, or Hall of Fame voting, I guess, in general. Sure. Could be something like that. When are we going to know if Ohio State's for real, that they're going to be truly relevant on the national scene this year? What do we need to see? Have we seen enough, or do we need to see, obviously, Indiana is going to be another peel off the onion of, okay, this is an even better team than Cincinnati, most likely, not by a whole lot. But, and we saw Ohio State go out and do X or Y. Therefore, we can conclude that they're ready for the Nebraskas, although we saw what the Huskers did last week, but they're ready for that ridiculous stretch of 5 games that they're going to see very soon.
Yeah, it is. The Indiana is like a slightly, maybe more than slightly better version of Indiana. With they've got the athletic quarterback, they've got a big, talented running back, they've got better receivers than Cincinnati, they've got probably better skill on defense, but I don't know if the package is as cohesive as maybe Cincinnati is. So it'll be interesting to see. Do they have is it another 42-0? If that something of that nature. If it is, that's a pretty good sign that things are going really, really well. there's been some talk this week. Some of the reporters were asking the Buckeyes about, heading west. It's a Big Ten road game. Danger, danger, danger. And how do you avoid that? And how do you keep your head where it needs to be? And I don't foresee that this weekend. They very well may lose. I don't expect it to be by 4 touchdowns or something like that. They seem to be pretty mentally stable right now this early in the season. So I don't – the Indiana talent is okay. It's like I said, they've got some good receivers, but Ohio State's talent usually wears them out in the fourth quarter. And I think that was something their coaches were talking about this week, where that's why they can't finish, is because Ohio State's depth and their talent. And this is year, 3 for Tom Allen, and they've built up the defense, they built up the talent, and they believe they're in a better position to withstand that fourth quarter and that late third quarter, and to be able to just not be worn down by it. We'll see. Ohio State's running game gets better as the game goes on. The offensive line just continues to lean on people, and that also opens up the play action. Although, interestingly, Indiana defensive coordinator Kane Womack said that Justin Fields does some things that they can take advantage of. They think they can take advantage of some of those play action situations. If that means, throwing some blitzes at him, we'll see. We all thought he was going to be tested by Cincinnati's defense. We wanted to see that, and he ends up throwing 1 bad pass in 25 attempts. So, Ryan Day has been impressed with his accuracy. Some of the windows might be a little more even tighter this time around. I don't know how much man we'll see from Indiana. I'm sure some, but I know they'd like to see some of that over the middle so that they can get some of those mesh routes going in and get KJ Hill involved. But the outside receivers have been getting open like crazy. Benjamin Victor has been doing well. Austin Mack has been doing well. And this Ohio State skill is it's another world from what Indiana has seen so far this year. No offense to Ball State or Eastern Illinois, and Ball State moved the ball on them a little bit, and Ohio State's got a little bit more talent than Ball State. So we'll see how it goes. But it is a bigger step up from Cincinnati, I believe, and I would expect the response to be commensurate.
Harold Buchanan has a very pertinent question to the live chat here. Mark, are you still the voice of college football? I hope so. Love your work. Fear not, Harold. I'm still the voice of college football. Thanks for checking in. We appreciate that. Dale Sherm, more to the topic of Ohio State football, just asked, based on what you guys have seen through 2 games and what you know of covering this team day after day after day after day, who are the leaders on this team? Steve?
I would go with Chase Young, obviously, which it helps when one of your best players, if not arguably your best player, is one of your hardest workers and most vocal leaders. And when practice ended today, he went over and spent time with the military personnel who visited practice and stayed and lingered and talked to those people for as long as anybody on the team did. And that's just another example of how genuine he is. So when your All-American candidate is your hardest worker, most genuine guy, and seems to be very humble. I mean, he came in after the game, and Ari Wasserman asked him, Chase, got to ask you about those hands. And he just smiled and said, I knew it was coming. You knew the question was coming right out of the gate. So he's got some character and some leadership there. Jordan Fuller at safety, I think, is another one of those guys. Robert Landers is a guy with a smile on his face all of his time, but he also puts his arm around the young guys and shows them what to do. So those 3 or 4 right there. Tuff Borland is kind of a leadership type guy, I think, behind the scenes at linebacker. And then over on offense, KJ Hill is tremendous, I think. He's in his 15th season, I think, with Ohio State at wide receiver. From Arkansas, and it means as much to him as it means to anybody on the team, how well that they do. And if they make it to 14 games and he catches a pass in every game the rest of the way, he's going to tie Gary Williams, who played there with Arch Leister in the late 70s and early 80s, for the most games consecutive, at least one reception, 48 games, which would be tremendous. He's also going to leave with the most catches in Ohio State history. He's about 37 away, and he should get that easily. He's getting 4 and 5 a week right now, so that should not be a problem. But I look at him. They talk about Fields, even though he's just a second-year college guy. He is the quarterback. And after laying back the first few months he was at Ohio State, he's starting to come to the forefront a little bit. And I think Dobbins is that way too. I think he's a guy that can rally some people around him and give that extra effort when they need it. So you got some guys there. I think there's probably others. I mean, it's a larger than normal senior class at Ohio State this year. They have 7 captains, 5 of them are seniors and 2 of them are juniors. And so, it's a varied group, and I think that that the leadership is where they needed to be for this team.
Yeah, I'd agree. This is Chase Young's defense, and Urban Meyer would always say, "When your best players are your best leaders, you've got something good," and they've got something there. Steve mentioned Justin Fields. I think of a moment in that game late where Ohio State is winning big, and Benjamin Victor is trash talking somebody from Cincinnati. And Fields went over and grabbed him and said, we don't need that. And that's a sophomore making a second start, talking to a senior who's been around for a while. And when we talked to Justin Fields, I think on Tuesday, he said that, Ryan Day has told him that there's no need to trash talk when you're winning that big, which I also think means trash talk when the game is still close. And
he said there's no need to trash talk when you're blowing them out.
Yeah. So, which is
Take
trash
that,
talk.
Cincinnati, put that in your pipe and smoke it.
And so this is a situation where each week Justin Fields has talked about the leadership that he's learning to utilize. And after the first week, it was, I can't let this team have a letdown on offense. That's my job to make sure it doesn't happen. And so, and we see, they did not have a letdown in that game. And then he's also pulling seniors aside in his second start saying, hey, chill out. And so, if this becomes Justin Fields' team on offense, that's great. But like Steve said, KJ Hill is there. Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor are both seniors. Even Thayer Munford, a junior, second-year starter on the offensive line. They've got guys, Brandon Bowen. There's a lot of guys out there who can provide leadership. But when it's your 2 or 3 or 4 of your best players, then you've got something. And when it's guys who don't necessarily play, we'll see how it goes. But these guys are all playing, and they're playing well right now.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We discuss the game we love each and every day. Please check out the videos. I am just stacked up with game previews coming your way in the next few days. Just pick out any big game this week, and we will have a preview coming your way if it's not already posted.
Which ones? Iowa State?
Yeah, it's not a great week. It is not a great week for big games.
There's no ranked games. There's no games matching
right
2 ranked opponents.
He's giving you all reasons why not to watch any of these.
My bad. Just cut this part out.
Relatively speaking, the big games of the week: TCU Purdue. We did a preview on TCU Purdue, which to me is an under the radar. Steve, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, Purdue doinked off that game at Nevada, so they got to get it back. I mean, this is a must win for them. I don't know if it's too early to say whether they're going to get the 6 wins or not, because we just don't know how they're going to mix when they get into Big Ten play. But I'm skeptical. That was a game that they had to have, and now this one is an absolute must win, because if they're 1-2 and have 9 Big Ten games left, they got to go 5-4, and I don't think they can do that because their division. They're going to be lucky to go maybe 2-4 in the division, something like that. Maybe beat Minnesota and Illinois. I don't know. I don't know who they beat, and then you have to win all your crossovers. I don't even know how that's possible. So I think that this is a must win for them. I was just going to make the joke that there are no games this weekend matching ranked teams anywhere in the country. It's a ranked team against an unranked team everywhere in the country. But we do have the buildup. We're now, what would it be, 10 days out from that Michigan, Wisconsin, how they play those 14-7, 13-6 standoff, need at midfield and just butt heads type game. Although Michigan has no power run game.
Michigan football anymore, apparently.
Yeah, so I don't know how that's going to go. But
they only scored 21 points.
If Wisconsin keeps playing like they're playing, that West is going to be closed down pretty quickly, because they are putting points and yards on the board. And I just wonder, I mean, Michigan's got to be wondering if they can beat them based off how poorly they've played really the first 2 games.
Well,
They
they've got a
can't.
bye week to try to
I
fix
don't
it.
know. I don't know if they can.
Not if they play like this. But getting back to Purdue, I'll be interested to see how they handle success, because they did need that game against Vandy, and then they win comfortably. And we'll see, can they put it together 2 in a row, because that loss to Nevada is, it's heartbreaking, but they
It's gonna
bounced
haunt 'em.
back. Yeah, and the only way to keep it from haunting them is to continue on. It's not like they're going to win a national championship, but they can still do everything they want to do with the division. And you just got to keep moving on and continue to get better each week. And that's the thing that sometimes separates Purdue or Nebraska or Iowa, or whenever you just have one of those letdowns that you're not like the Nevada game. I mean, that's a Purdue special, and Purdue needs to avoid those Purdue specials.
Fair enough. Yeah, Purdue's season last year was certainly very uneven. Ohio State, but even beyond that, they had some really impressive wins, but 7 losses, and culminated with just not showing up against Auburn, and that was 56 points in the first half. That was beyond embarrassing. This Indiana team, as you guys mentioned, 2-0, but Ball State and Eastern Illinois. Michael Penix won the quarterback position over Peyton Ramsey, who's been the guy that we've all been accustomed to watching play quarterback for Indiana. And the kid, I think his name is Jack Tuttle off the top of my head, the Utah transfer, who was vying for the job as well. Kalen DeBoer, they wrestled away from Fresno State, threw him like $800,000 or $900,000 to be offensive coordinator. So it'll be interesting to see, after what Ohio State's accomplished on defense, whether Indiana and what is Tony, in ranking the positions as you do every offseason leading into the season, is a very talented group of skill players for Indiana, headlined by Stephen Scott at running back, but they also have 2 other running backs that they're very high on, who complement him. And then at wide receiver, they're 5 or 6 deep with very capable players.
Yeah, like Nick Westbrook has been around forever at wide receiver. Donovan Hale is another guy. Wap Villior has been around forever. But the running back, Samson James, was formerly an Ohio State commit, freshman there. So they do have some talent. And if Penix can be the guy and just avoid those mistakes, which he hasn't done, and that was the difference with Peyton Ramsey, was he fought so hard for that team and he would get them back into games, but he was also oftentimes the reason they weren't in games with his mistakes. And so I think it's good that he has been challenged and he has lost his job. I don't know that he's lost it forever, because I don't know how big the separation is, but anytime you get that competition, it's going to make everybody better. And if you don't have competition at quarterback, you're never going to be that good. And they've got it, and everybody will be better for it. And receivers are there to make some plays. I'm looking forward to see how those Ohio State corners do, because they've struggled. A couple of years ago, we remember Nate Sudfeld. I can't keep track of all these Indiana quarterbacks, but threw for 400 yards.
That Munchie Legault had a big game.
Yeah.
I know Munchie Legault was at Cincinnati, but
Right. But
I called the guy at Indiana Munchie Legault too, out of tribute to the guy at Cincinnati. That's
but
just my
they
own
put up
personal
some numbers.
tribute. Was it
Arnett,
Richard Munchie Legault, I think.
And Damon Arnett I'm sure remembers those days and that game. And there's some things to prove here, because they've been talking about how Indiana has stayed close with them. We talked to players now the last 2 days, and that's been a popular topic. And so I don't think they're going there just expecting to walk over them, just like they didn't come into Cincinnati expecting to walk over the Bearcats. And just as we're talking about J.K. Dobbins, when you're not looking for the home runs, but you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing, you'll be surprised to find out that then you end up sending one over the fence, or shutting out 42-0 Cincinnati, or doing whatever ends up happening to Indiana, which I do not have a score yet, and I know I have to come up with one. So I'll let Steve talk, and I'll try to figure it out what I'm going to do.
Yeah, the state of the Indiana quarterback position is this: Peyton Ramsey, in that game last year in Columbus, threw for over 300 yards. And it seemed to me like he was in complete command. But what that told you more than anything was just how bad Ohio State was defensively, more than how great Ramsey was, because he struggled against other opponents, and they ended up 5-7 and didn't make a bowl game. 2 years under Allen, they are 5-7 and 5-7. He coached the bowl game, at the end of 2016 after they and as we should say, our own Kevin Wilson split ties with one another in December, and he accepted a buyout and walked away. So they get into the offseason, and Penix, I think the proper pronunciation I'm being told is Penix. And I met with Jeff Rabjohns, who covers Indiana for our 24/7 site in Indiana, and he was raving about Penix, how he should be the guy. And I'm like, well, Ramsey just torched Indiana for 300, or Ohio State for 300 yards. And he's like, it doesn't matter. Penix is the guy. And through 2 games, he's played very well, other than those 2 interceptions he threw against Ball State. He's a runner as well as a thrower, can create on third down with his feet if he has to move the chains. And Ohio State's going to have to mind its P's and Q's, play great assignment football. And as I said, he's got a great tight end, Peyton Hendershot, Whop Philyor. I think that's how you pronounce the guy's name, one of the wide receivers. And Westbrook is the other one, and those guys are all veteran players. So they've got depth. Stevie Scott is not out of the blocks real strong. He's barely got 100 yards in 2 wins over Ball State and Eastern Illinois. Probably didn't run him much against Eastern Illinois. That one was out of control early. But Stevie Scott is a guy who went for 1,000 yards last year as a freshman for Indiana, and I think you have to respect his ability to run the football. And if he can break one at some point, maybe this is a closer game than what we might think. But again, a young quarterback, Ohio State over the years. I mean, I think about Artur Sikowski last year from Rutgers. Now, obviously, Rutgers was terrible, so that may not be the best example. But there have been the Minnesota guys, that Onyx Stad the year before or whatever. You put these guys out there that have only had 1 or 2 starts in their career against Ohio State's defense other than last year, and it's usually like a 40-5 type route. I mean, it's not pretty. Interceptions, sacks, fumbles, and Ohio State's front 4 on defense looks like it's the best in the Big Ten, and they're going to make life, tough on whoever they play. And next up is Indiana.
So before we get to predictions, I want to remind everyone in the live chat, depending and regardless, I should say, of your own personal standards, let's try to keep it to football. And I love the trash talking. The trash talking is why we're here. Talk about your program, your team, trash the other team. Don't make it personal. That's disgusting when you make it personal. And you know what the hot button topics are. We all know that. I try to monitor the chat as much as possible, but engage in the conversation and look for decent comments to put on the screen. Thank you, everyone out there, for self-policing the live chat as much as possible. But if I'm able to I've got an issue where I've got the stream here on a laptop, but I'm using this other stream here to enter the comments onto the screen. Therefore, I'm not able to block them over here. So thank you so much for calling out the ridiculous idiot that's making stupid comments to people about personal items. All right, we've got Ohio State going on the road for the first time at Indiana. Steve, so eloquently, if you missed it, and many people do, we've got about 100 on the line right now, and it takes a while for people to catch up with the live stream. Go back. The video is going to post in just a few minutes. Go back and give it a look. Steve does an amazing job, and we thank him so much for posting these videos each and every week on Bucknuts. But Steve gave us a rundown of what Indiana football has looked like against Ohio State for the past 30 or 35 years. And but we're going to make our predictions. Not good in the win-loss column, but man, there have been some scares. And we're going to run down our predictions right now. I will let everyone know that you can find my prediction is hermetically sealed and only available to Steve and Tony in our Twitter chat after we discuss here, but you can catch it at the Voice of College Football. The link is below. All right. What do you think, Steve?
Do we want to throw in our buddy Noon, his pick?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Kevin Noon, I believe 38-14 Buckeyes.
Yes, I think that was what he couldn't be here tonight. Had date night with wifey, but some type of a
Very important.
special thing for them. So good for them. Yeah, he said 38-14. I'm kind of a like mind. I think Ohio State in Indiana for the first half could be a situation if Indiana can sustain possession and keep the ball away from Ohio State and try and keep Ohio State's offense off the field and try and shorten the game. That's going to be what they try and do. To me, for Ohio State, the key is J.K. Dobbins. On first down, he needs to go out there and get them 5 or 6 yards. He in the run game, the offensive line, however you scheme it, it could be end around, it could be quarterback draw with Fields, it could be screen passes, it could be whatever it is, that we now consider the modern running game, the essential, long handoff or, however you want to put it, not the downfield passing game. They need to get Justin Fields comfortable in down and distance as much as they can and take some of the onus off of him. That way he's not sitting there on 3rd and 9 trying to make a play and have to do that on a routine basis. So I think if they do that and establish the run, they should be in good shape. And I think they pull away, they lean on Indiana, and they pull away in the second half like they did there 2 years ago. I mean, that experience not lost on me. Indiana, crumpled like a cheap suit, I guess, or whatever, folded like a house of cards. I don't know, whatever metaphor that we use nowadays to indicate that a team has fallen completely apart in a phase of the game.
Harbaugh.
That's what happened to Indiana 2 years ago. 42-21 is my pick. Buckeyes moved to 3-0, and that's how I see it.
The fun thing about going to Indiana is it's basically a branch campus for Ohio State fans. The way they travel. Back when schools used to have media guides, this would be the game where Indiana would get the helicopter up in the air and take a photo of the full red.
Look at all that red
of all of their fans in the crowd. And of course, it was half Ohio State fans, but it would
they're all wearing red, yeah.
Make for a good picture every other year for their media guides, and then they'd use 1-2 years in a row. And so it's fun to go over there, and it's a good atmosphere for the Buckeye fans. And I wonder if maybe sometimes that has backfired for the team where they don't have an us against the world mentality there, because it's us and Ohio State fans against Indiana, and maybe that doesn't seem so daunting. But I'm thinking if Indiana continues to play a soft defense against Ohio State, they'll take what they give them, and they've been able to convert. They're connecting when you bend but don't break against an Ohio State offense that is clicking. You just continue to bend, and then you give up scores. And it may not be a 30-yarder. It may just be a bunch of 7 to 13 yarders, but eventually Justin Fields runs into the end zone, and now they've got a touchdown. They're worried about giving up big plays. And so they're going to, I assume, try to make Ohio State have sustained drives. From what we've seen, they're okay with that. Now, you're going to need Ohio State's offensive line not to have that critical hold on 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2 when they do get the first down, but then now it's backed up 10 yards and you sort of kill the drive at that point. They've done that a few times. They've shot themselves in the foot. They're stopping themselves more than the opponents are. So you avoid that and you play sharp, you play clean. And really, I don't see Indiana being able to stop them enough times. And then I don't see Indiana being able to score enough times against an Ohio State defense that I think is pretty good. And we'll find out, and we'll see what Penix does. We'll see what the receivers do. Stevie Scott, to me, is kind of another Michael Warren, where he kind of fits what Ohio State does on defense. And so they should be able to contain him. And that doesn't bode well for Indiana's offense. So I'm thinking something like 38-10. Now let's go 38-13, throw in a field goal or a missed extra point, something like that. The 38-13. And it's if Justin Fields is as good as he's looked like, then this is the score. They should put up 38, 42, 52, something like that if the offense is as good as they've shown. And we're not being fooled, which has never happened.
Mark, I want to throw in two quick quips, just really quick. Along the lines of what Tony was saying about taking the helicopter beauty shot of all the red and the stadium's full, The legend has it that one time with Lee Corso as the coach, when they played at Ohio State, I believe, they kicked a field goal on their first possession. We're ahead 3-0, and allegedly he called a timeout to get a photo of the team with the scoreboard in the background with them ahead of Ohio State 3-0 at one point in one of the many games he coached against Woody Hayes. And Woody Hayes, I don't know if that's a true story or not, or if that's just more Corso hyperbole. You know how he's prone to tell a story or two now and then. That may be like an after dinner remark more than something that actually happened. The other one was 1996. It was the penultimate game before Ohio State was playing Michigan the following week, but Ohio State just needed a win to clinch the Rose Bowl. And they get it. They're trailing at the end of the third quarter to Bill Mallory, who I think he was retiring as the Indiana coach that year. And they're trailing, but there was a play where maybe Andy Katzenmoyer knocked the ball away from the quarterback Rogers, and it was on somebody's back, and Matt Finkus scooped it out of the sky or whatever. And the debate was whether or not Katzenmoyer had strung him out long enough to stop his forward progress, that they should have blown the play dead or not, but they didn't, because Finkus took the ball and ran it in for the touchdown. And when the game ended, Ohio State won something like 27-10.
Yep.
27-10, but I mean, they were behind 10-7, I think, at the end of the third quarter, and that play put them ahead to stay. When the game ended, the chain link fence behind the south end zone, the Ohio State fans came out of the south stands and knocked that fence to the ground, and I have a photo of Ohio State's fans rushed the field at Indiana because they clinched the Rose Bowl. That may be the only time in recorded history where the visiting fans rushed a field on another school's field to celebrate the Rose Bowl. And Andy Geiger, who was the athletic director, he was a little bit smug. He made a comment in the aftermath of the whole thing, seeing the fence was a shambles and everything. We will pay for that. We will make sure that they are reimbursed. We will pay for that. Just very smugly, we're going to the Rose Bowl. We'll cut you a check. No problem.
So at that point, yes, Ohio State had not been to the Rose Bowl since I believe the 1984 season against
long
USC.
Drink of water.
Yeah, so it had been a long time. So it was a huge deal to get back to the Rose Bowl, despite winning a number of shared Big Ten championships between those two times. And my personal story from that game was that I was in Mississippi covering the SEC. I was off that day. Actually, my wife at the time was pregnant with our first son. We were out buying that size of a video camera so that we could, capture all the moments and so forth. And my wife went into labor not long after Ohio State clinched a trip to the Rose Bowl. And we had our first son the next morning.
Awesome.
And what was talked about in those parts was that Mississippi State beat Alabama. And that was the big win for the Bulldogs that season, beating Alabama, and not the Alabama program we see now, but still Alabama. And that was the game everybody was locked into. But I, of course, was celebrating Ohio State's. Oh, yeah, my son was born. That's right. I was celebrating that as well. Good stuff from Tony Gerdeman and Steve Hellwagon. Always enjoy the conversation on Ohio State football. So we will catch everyone next time. And yes, Mark Rogers grinding, hit the like button, 904 Hurricane. Right after this, no more live streams tonight, but I'm recording an ACC full preview weekend in just a few minutes. And then after that, one of the many insignificant games from this weekend, as described by Tony. We're shooting a Florida-Kentucky preview, TCU, Purdue, Arizona State, Michigan State, a number of them that we'll have out in the next few days.
Mark, real quick, these weeks are when we see the most upsets, where the craziest stuff happens. So prepare for that, at least.
There's a lot of good, decent games. There's a ton of them, but yeah, there's not an LSU Texas kind of game this weekend. All right, guys, we appreciate it. We can't do it without you.
Have a good night.
Take care.
All right, guys.